Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here to start on a new analysis series. We're going to talk about this book. We're talking about Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Now, you might ask yourself, why are we doing Persepolis? Why are we digging into this? Well, there's a few reasons. One of them, of course, is the practical one. As with a lot of books in these analytical series, I am teaching this. I will be teaching this to my class probably end of September, maybe. I think we're going to start. And it would be a really good idea for me to know the book well, I think, before I try to teach it. That's always good. So, of course, one way to make sure that I know the book reasonably well is to talk it out here in full view of all you people, where I can mess up and it doesn't really matter. But nevertheless, I do want to make sure that I have a good grasp on the text before I try to teach it or rather guide my students through their reading of it. So, another reason why I want to talk about this book is because of Virginia Woolf. If you remember A Room of One's Own, one of the points that Woolf brought up is that the perspective of women in history is often neglected. We don't hear so much about women and their views or what they went through during, the 100 Years' War or the Crusades or things like that, right? So this is a woman giving us her perspective of growing up in a really significant modern set of events, right? We have the fall of the Shah. We have the rise of the fundamentalist Iranian government. We have the Iran-Iraq war. We have, by the end of it, the invasion of Kuwait in the early 90s. So all of these things are happening, and here is the point of view of a woman who grows up during all these times. And I think it is very good to have this perspective on these moments, especially because she is living in a place where the perspectives of women are not appreciated. They are not even to some degree allowed once the government of Iran really kind of starts cracking down on its very fundamentalist laws. So I think it is important. And, as an American growing up kind of concurrently with this in many ways, when I heard about Iran and the people of Iran, I never heard about cultural complexity. I never heard about their 1,000 years of tradition. I never heard that they were Persian and not Arab, right? I didn't find that out for a while. All I really heard from the media and from everywhere else is they were a bunch of bearded lunatics who wanted to destroy America. That was it. That was all I got. I learned better, certainly, but I think it is good to see different perspectives on different parts of the world and understand that these are people with the same kind of needs and wants and aspirations and desires and heartbreaks that everybody else has. They're just living under extraordinary circumstances in this case. So Marjane Satrapi herself, she comes from a very long line of Persian important people. She's actually the great-granddaughter of a Persian emperor. During her time, the Shah is overthrown, which was done with no small amount of help from the U.S. government. The Iranian Revolution happened when she was about 10 years old, and we see her as a child trying to adjust to this new regime. And the book kind of follows her through her life into about her mid-20s. Satrapi wrote the book in the early 2000s. She originally wrote it in French. And what's interesting is when she talks about it, she likes to call it a comic book, apparently. She doesn't like graphic novel. She really kind of wants to, reclaim that phrase, comic books, which I find interesting because I almost certainly would call it a graphic novel. To me, comic books is, superheroes and things like that. And I know a lot of superhero fans, myself included, like to call our superhero books graphic novels, but they're superhero comics. But anyway, that means that when we talk about this book, we're going to have to talk about comics, about sequential storytelling. We're going to have to talk about what is the language of a comic and what does it do that just flat prose cannot do, right? What is it doing that is unique to it as a medium? There's a really good book by MacLeod, which I'll make sure to investigate before we get to that section. But what's neat is that when Satrapi is asked, why did you write this as a graphic novel? She very well could have written her memoir in prose, had she wanted to. Her response apparently is, when you have the talent to write and draw, it seems a shame to choose only one. And that really is reflective of her character in the story, too, that she is a person of great passions, that there are so many things that she wants to do, and she really doesn't take well to people trying to hold her down and trying to sort of put out that flame of creativity and passion in her life. And we see it all throughout the book. So I can kind of see herself saying, you know what, I can write and I can draw. I'm going to do a comic. That's it. All right? So yeah. So the story it is a memoir. It is a coming-of-age story in many, many ways. It takes us from when she is very, very young, an idealistic child. She wants to be a prophet. She wants to be a revolutionary. She wants to be somebody who's very important. She wants to be a leader of people. And then she has to kind of adjust to this sort of new world every time something crazy and radical happens. She has neighbors and friends who are sent to prison. She has to adjust to all sorts of new things that she was not ready for. And like I said, she finds herself, she comes from a fairly liberal, open-minded family, but Iran is slowly becoming a much less liberal, open-minded place. She had a secular co-ed school that gets shut down. The line is, all bilingual schools must be closed down. They are symbols of capitalism and decadence. That's from one of the many, many, many anonymous bearded men that show up throughout the comic. They have to wear the veil. The veil shows up twice, actually, in this book as a chapter title. Means something different each time, of course, but nevertheless. And slowly, she is forced to endure more and more difficulty and more hardship, and she has every reason to kind of let the world shut her up, as it were. She has every reason why that would be a good idea. Why it would be a good idea to just sort of put your head down and get along, and she has a very, very hard time doing that. Eventually, she is sent off to boarding school in Austria because at home she punched a principal of her school. She openly disagreed with a religious scholar in another school. And that gets us into part 2, where she's living in Austria. She meets a whole bunch of new and interesting people. She starts reading more, kind of getting back into political philosophy, especially communism. She gets into a bad relationship. She starts doing drugs. Things go badly. And she has to move back to Iran after 4 years in Europe. Endures culture shock, trying to figure out how does she adapt. She's now a person who doesn't really fit because she spent enough time abroad that she has changed. She doesn't feel like she fits in Iran anymore. But of course, while she was abroad, she didn't fit there because she was from Iran. She generally feels untethered. She feels alienated. She feels like she doesn't belong anywhere. And it takes a great amount of kind of personal wherewithal for her to gather herself up and start taking charge of her life, to get a job, to get married, and then eventually divorce. And to then finally realize that Iran is not a place where she can stay. Iran is not a place where she can stay and be her full self. And so she leaves for France, and that's about where the book ends. So what are we going to get from this book? We're going to get a lot of stuff. Again, there is the experience of women in Iran during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is remarkable and it's portrayed all throughout the book. But I think if we want to get it on a level where we can all kind of relate to it, because I don't know what it was like to be a woman in Iran in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, not in any way, shape, or form. But we can sort of look at this book as a battle between personal freedom, personal expression, and then the cultural forces that are on us to try and make us conform to what is wanted. And we see that wherever she goes, but I mean, it is certainly more obvious when she's in Iran and there's a whole government designed to tell everybody, not just women, but especially women, how they should behave and how they should be. We're going to see that. There's a lot of the usual growing up stuff, right? Making dumb decisions that you make as a young person and having to deal with the consequences of those. Her dealing with her family and trying to figure out sort of who her parents are to her. Trying to figure out what her friends are to her. And really, it is a search for self, which is something that we all, I hope, go through. And then, yeah, we definitely want to talk about the art. The art style is very, very stark. It is black and white entirely. And there's no shading. There's no gray shades. And there's probably something to that. But we'll have to talk about the art style. Certainly, we'll talk about some of the characters that are in there. Maybe a little bit more about the historical background and perspective as we go. I don't know. We'll try a bunch of stuff. We'll see what fits, really. But I think it is a really good book. I've read it a few times. I've done it in class once. I don't think I did it very well the first time, so I do want to make sure I do it better this time. So if you have read Persepolis, you want to talk about it, great. comment away. Put them in the comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your thoughts are, if you have a favorite moment or scene or character or whatnot that maybe we can put in. We shall see. But in the meantime, let's get ready. Let's get ready to start a new series. We're talking Persepolis, Marjane Satrapi. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great. Sure, I guess so. I hope so. We'll see. All right. So thank you very much for sticking around, and I will see you next time.